What's up, guys? I'm back again. I'm the Patchwork Commander, and I gotta start off by saying thank you so much. I got 13 subscribers just based off of the last video, so thanks again. And if you like the content, please like, comment, and subscribe. It helps out a lot, and I just want to be able to get my name out there and help out more people play the game. So I'm gonna get right into my top 5 overrated and my top 5 underrated. Now, please pick some of these cards up because I just know Magic the Gathering lately, cards are going to spike, and I have a feeling, especially this number 1 card, it's going to spike just because of how good it is. And I'm going to start off with number 5 overrated card, and these are the snow-tapped dual lands. Now, these dual lands are just really bad because they're do-nothing tap lands, and the problem is it can turn your power level 8 deck to a power level 5 deck. Because if you can't play your ramp early, you're going to have a huge problem. If you're going to go on turn 2, play this as a tap land. Now you can't play your signets anymore, or your 2-mana mana rocks that you should really be playing in Commander, just because you can have more explosive turns later on in the game, and that can really change the outcome for what you do later on. Start off with my number 5 underrated card, and these are the tap lands that I think you should be playing instead of these dual lands, is, for example, Port of Carfel. It enters the battlefield tapped, yes, but the thing is, you'd pay 7 mana for this ability anyways because it costs 3 generic, 1 blue, and 2 black, and you tap it to sacrifice this land, and then you mill the top 4 cards, and you can put a creature from the graveyard onto the battlefield. And the reason I say you pay 7 mana for this ability, because it's an instant speed, and there just aren't that many good instant speed reanimation targets, and the fact that it gives any creature that you play, that you reanimate, haste, is such a big deal and such a game changer. And the other one that I think is also in that number 5 slot is Axguard Armory. Now this enters the battlefield tapped as well. It taps for a white, but you can pay 1 generic, 2 red, 1 white, and you can tap it to sacrifice to search for an aura and an equipment and put them right into your hand. Now you'd pay 5 mana for this ability anyways, so the fact that you can do this on instant speed and put it on a land, this land basically counts as a spell slot. Now we're going into number 4 overrated, and this is Eradicator Valkyrie. This costs 2 generic, a black and a black. This creature, Angel Berserker, is a 4/3 with a bunch of keywords: flying, lifelink, protection from planeswalkers, and it even has a boast ability that costs 1 generic and 1 black, and it says sacrifice a creature. Each opponent either has to sacrifice a creature or a planeswalker. Now, this card, the problem is this boast ability is too expensive, and this creature doesn't have haste. And you think it's weird that I say this creature doesn't have haste, but think of Rankle, Master of Pranks. You get this ability, plus you also get the ability for each opponent to discard, each player to discard a card, and each opponent to lose 1 life and draw a card. Now those abilities are just better because they have haste and you can do them right away. It already has a sacrifice ability, and you don't have to pay mana to do it. Boast means you can do it any time at your turn, but the problem is paying 2 mana for this effect is just too much. When Rankle, you don't have to pay 2 mana, and it does the ability right when it comes into play because it has haste. So now I'm going to get into my number 4 underrated card, and that's Ravenform. This costs 2 generic and 1 blue, and it says exile target artifact or creature. Its controller creates a 1/1 bird with flying. Now, honestly, who cares if they get a 1/1 bird with flying? Obviously, that's not the part that matters. But this is the first time Blue's really getting artifact destruction, and the fact that you can just exile a creature is huge, because most of the time you just have Pongifies, and there's going to be a lot more indestructible creatures running around, especially with cards like Toski, stuff that's really hard to remove. And this also helps because you're going to have cards that, for example, there's the artifact that costs 9 mana and gives all artifacts indestructible, and in a blue deck, you just can't stop that card normally. Now you can just pay 3 mana and exile this. But the reason I think it's so much better is normally on turn 2 you don't have that many spells to cast, so you can just foretell this for 2 generic mana, any mana of any color, and then later on in the game, you just have to have 1 mana open, and yes, it's sorcery speed, but you get to just exile anything you want. Now, at my number 5 overrated card, we have Birgi, God of Storytelling. Now, this legendary creature god is a 3/3, and it says whenever you cast a spell, add 1 red mana, And this mana does not empty as steps and phases end until the end of your turn. So you're still gonna lose this mana if the turn ends. Now, I think this is honestly worse than Brawl. Now, it goes in the same deck as Brawl, but it's just a worse card because the fact that it gives you 1 mana after you've cast the spell is not as good as just making the spell cheaper, because you want to be able to chain as many spells into each other, and it just costing less mana up front is going to do way more for you in the long run. Yes, this gives you mana, but I think a lot of people are building around this, and obviously they're not worried about the second half of the ability, which is creatures you control with Boast activate. The Boast abilities trigger twice. Honestly, there just aren't that many cards around Boast, so people can't really build around that card. So they're trying to make this in a Storm Commander, and they just can't do that because red doesn't give you enough card draw to really supplement that Storm package. So I think the better half of this card is the other side, which is Harnfell, Horn of Bounty. Now this costs 4 generic and 1 red, and this is a legendary artifact. And you see it says discard a card and exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may cast those cards this turn. Now, this is not only just good in a real deck, it's really good in a mono red deck because you don't have that card draw to supplement your deck that much. So this becomes, I think, one of the best card draw effects in red. Yes, it costs 5 mana, but this is guaranteed to draw you two cards every single turn, and if you really like the card in your hand, you just can keep it. You don't have to discard a card. So that takes me right into my number 3 underrated card, and that's the Trickster God's Heist. Now this saga costs 2 generic, 1 blue, and 1 black, and at the first ability it says exchange control of 2 target creatures. Yes, any 2 target creatures. So if you control a 1/1 creature token and your opponent, they control a huge creature. For example, an Avenger of Zendikar, Koma, any of these other creatures, you get to just exchange control of those creatures. So that's really good in and of itself, and I think this is really good in a Flicker deck because, for example, if I play my Aminatu deck and I play a Ravenous Chupacabra and it's destroyed a creature, now it's just a 2/2 body that does nothing. I can exchange that control of that Ravenous Chupacabra with like a Rankle, Master of Pranks, or any other card on the battlefield that's just better. And I'm just going to get so much value off of that. But it still has more abilities. I think people forget that. And then the next ability is you can exchange control of 2 non-land, non-creature permanents. Now, what this means is that you can trade the Trickster God's Heist. Yes, you can trade this enchantment for a Smothering Tithe, for an Akroma's Memorial, any card like that, and I think that's just insane. So first of all, the first ability was great, the second ability was amazing, and let's say you give this card to your opponent, what do they get to do with this card? All it does for them, it gains them 3 life, and anyone loses 3 life. Yes, you're probably going to lose 3 life, but it's Commander. Who cares about 3 life? So this is really good in an Aminatu deck because you can blink this card and get this ability again and again. But honestly, just having this card in any sort of Dimir or a 3-color, 4-color, 5-color deck, I think it's just good enough because every ability on this card is relevant. So that brings me to my number 2 overrated card, which I think is just too expensive and it just doesn't do enough. And that's Vargoth, Bloodsky, Sire. And this costs 2 generic and 1 black. This is a 2/3 with Death Touch, and it has a Boast ability for 1 generic and 1 black. And it says, target player may search their library for a card, and if they do, shuffle their library, put that card on top of their library. So basically, this is a Vampiric Tutor every single turn. Yeah, but it costs 5 mana to use this ability the first time. Now, then it costs 7 mana the second time. And the thing is, you're probably not going to attack with this creature more than 2 times, just because a 2/3 body, yes, it has Death Touch, but eventually it's just going to get blocked anyways. And the problem is, it doesn't. If this card put that card into your hand, I think that would be a huge game changer, because every single time you put the top card of your library, the card on top of your library, you just get rid of a card that you could have drawn. So the nice part about tutoring a card is, yes, you get the best card into your hand, but the problem is you're losing your card draw every single turn. And that's just a huge downside to me. And that takes me right into my number 2 underrated card, and this is Carter Doomscourge. And this costs 2 generic and a Rakdos, and this is one, and it's a Demon Berserker. It's a legendary creature, of course, because every creature nowadays is legendary. It says when Carter enters the battlefield, until your next turn, creatures your opponents control attack each combat if able, and it has a second ability too. It says whenever an attacking creature dies, you lose 1 life, each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. So this card is a Disrupt Decorum with upside, because you play this in a Marchesa deck, for example, and it says whenever a creature with a 1/1 counter dies, return it to the battlefield, which is basically another flicker effect. And you can play this if you have, I don't know, a 5-color flicker deck as well. And the reason I think this card is so good is people don't realize that Disrupt Decorum usually kills one player at the table, because a lot of the time in Commander you have one person with a huge board state, but they just can't attack because the other opponents have a bunch of blockers and they're just scared of retaliation. Now, if one of those opponents now just had to swing in with all their creatures and they can't do anything about it because they have no more blockers, all of a sudden one person dies, and no matter what, your opponents cannot attack you unless you're the last person standing. So that means no matter what, you're free from all these attacks. And the best part is, if your opponents have a bunch of tokens, or you have a bunch of tokens, and you want to attack with them, now each token that they want to kill, it costs them 1 life, and you gain life. Now this is the first time you really get to gain life in Rakdos, so I think this is really cool. Please put this in your decks, because this is a game-changing effect in Rakdos. And yes, we finally did it. We made it to my number 1 overrated card. Drumroll, please. That card is the card that broke every single format, and yes, we made it. Tybalt's Trickery is on my list. Number 1 overrated card. This costs 1 generic and 1 red. It's an instant speed counterspell in red. This is the first time ever we've had this. And this says choose 1, 2, or 3 at random. The spell's controller that was countered is going to mill that many cards, and then reveal the top card until they reveal a non-land card, and they may cast it without paying its mana cost, and then they put those cards revealed this way into the bottom of the library in a random order. So people are looking this as the savior. Finally we have a counterspell in red. This is going to do so much. But honestly, if you're going to want a counterspell and you're really worried about people destroying your stuff, I think Pyroblast is still a way better card, just because of the simple fact of 90% of the time when you play this, I think they're just going to get a really useful spell out of it. Because if you play cards like Chaos Warp and you think this is the same thing as Chaos Warp, it's just not. Because with Chaos Warp, they're not guaranteed to get a card. Because Chaos Warp says exile a permanent, and then they shuffle their library, put that card you exiled into their library, and they reveal the top card. So if it's a permanent, they may put that card onto the battlefield. 99% of the time, that just gets a land, or it gets an instant under sorcery onto the top of your opponent's library, and they just can't do anything with it. Tybalt's Trickery is gonna give your opponent a card no matter what. So yes, you countered a big combo piece or a big huge creature, but I just think you're gonna get another creature for them, and it's just not gonna help you out. So please, do not think this is the savior of red. Just play Pyroblast. It's going to do the same, because every single person has a blue deck playing against them. I don't think I remember the last time I haven't played versus a blue deck. And finally, we got there. My number 1 card, and I think this card is by far overlooked, and I think a lot of people are gonna start playing this the moment they see the power level, and that's why I think it's gonna be another Skyclave apparition, because that card went from $2 to $5 the moment people realize how good this card is, and this is the card I think is gonna skyrocket in price the moment people really start playing with it, and that's Dream Devourer. It costs 2 mana, it's 1 generic and 1 black, it's a demon cleric, and it's a 0/3, and it gives each spell in your hand Foretell. Foretell is going to just mean that you exile a card face down, and you pay 2 mana to exile that card face down. Now that spell costs 2 generic less mana. That means you can play a big spell, a turn 6 spell, on turn 4. Now this is basically a mana elf in black. We've never had that type of creature before. For example, we were talking about Vornaclex in my last episode. Imagine taking 2 mana off of Vornaclex. Now you can play turn 4 Vornaclex, and now you're going to play Nissa the turn after. And if you can do that in turn 5, already have a Planeswalker ultimate, I don't know how you lose this game. You cannot lose that game. This is the first time ever we basically have a mana elf in black. So this is going to go into so many decks because it only costs 2 mana. I think this is better than any of your signets or anything that you can possibly play at 2 mana. This is one of the better ramp spells. Please, try this card out. And the best part is, it gets +2/+0 for each card you foretell, which means that it's also going to get bigger, and it's going to be a big, beefy body just for 2 mana. Because if you foretell 2 cards, it's already attacking for 4 damage for 2 mana. So this card has a lot of upside, and its floor, it's so low because it can do so much. Please put this card in your deck and realize that you can play every spell 2 turns earlier. Every spell that you have that has a bunch of generic mana costs, you can play 2 turns earlier. Look at that and tell me how good it is. Thank you so much again. Again, I'll tell you one more time, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. If you like my top 10, comment down below what changes you think you would make to my top 10 overrated, or top 5 overrated, and top 5 underrated. Tell me what you think. Thank you very much for watching. Patchwork Commander out. Have a good day.